Good morning. Even though the theme of homecoming is it's Berkeley time, we've been told not to start on Berkeley time. So I'm going to try to be prompt. It's 11:31, actually. My name is Carolyn Ayoya Irving, and I work in University Development and Alumni Relations. And my post is really to be embedded in the College of Letters and Science, and I'm amazed every day at the wonders that are in the 5 divisions of the college. And if you are an alum of the college or have a kid that's going to the College of Letters and Science, you're lucky indeed, because we have some of the most brilliant faculty in the world, as you will see today. So I am going to introduce our speaker, Alex Filippenko. Alex Filippenko is one of the world's most highly cited astrophysicists and was the only person to be on both teams that simultaneously discovered the Nobel-worthy accelerating expansion of the universe. Gotta let that sink in for a while. Yeah, that's a lot. Not only that, but Alex has been voted UC Berkeley's best professor a record 9 times. He also appears frequently on TV documentaries and is addicted to observing total solar eclipses. He's been able to observe 20 so far, so he's well ahead of me. So please welcome Professor Filippenko, and we will hopefully have some time for questions after. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Carolyn, for that warm introduction, and thank you all for being here this morning. Got a lot of interesting things to cover, but you can't start without saying "Go Bears," and it is homecoming. So let's go ahead and beat Duke. Okay, very good. So how did this whole thing get started? What am I doing on a cruise ship at the North Pole running a marathon? My wife Noelle and I ran a marathon twice a couple of decades ago for charity. It was the Honolulu Marathon. I think we were raising money for AIDS research. But I am a walker and runner, but I'm not a marathon runner. In January of 2024, I get this message from some guy I'd never heard of, from some company I'd never heard of, and he basically said, he does specialty marathon trips. And by that, I mean, look at their website. This is a screenshot I took just last night, so these are the ones in the future. But North Pole Marathon, both a summer and spring version, Antarctic Ice Marathon, Antarctic Ice Ultra Marathon, Volcano Marathon on Easter Island, Strait of Magellan Marathon, World Challenge, Aurora. I mean, if you want to go, you can still sign up for this one in November 2025 in Antarctica. And this World Challenge, this is 777. You do 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 consecutive days. How crazy is that? And in fact, the last group to have done it did it in 5 days and 20 hours. So they did it in just 6 days, basically. I mean, they're a little bit nutty, but this is a real company, and they exist, and I saw online that they're legitimate. And if you add the North Pole Marathon to your 777, then you've got the Grand Slam, okay? So I thought, well, what the heck, okay, sounds kind of interesting, but why do they want me? They were going to have this thing called the North Pole Forum, where there was going to be a bunch of talks, mostly only 1 or at most 2 per person, largely about climate and sustainability and things like that, okay? But he wanted one principal speaker who would give a bunch of talks on some interesting topic, and it didn't necessarily have to be climate and things like that. He wanted astronomy because astronomy's in the news a lot, and he had heard of me or something or other. So that's how it happened. And then I figured, well, as long as I'm going, I might as well run the marathon too, right? Okay, so this is how this all started. Oliver Wang runs the company, and here he is on the cruise. Any photo that looks professional, especially any photo that has this little logo here, was taken by Richard Drucker. I didn't have time to label all these things. Some are mine, but most of the good ones are Richard Drucker's, so credit where credit is due, okay? I was loading slides until 4 o'clock yesterday morning, or this morning. Yeah, and I taught at 9 o'clock this morning. So this is how it ended up, starting out, right? I said, okay, we'll do this, and here's the poster that they had on their website and stuff like that. And the trip actually started in Paris, which was kind of nice because I got to visit some colleagues at the Institut d'Astrophysique there and stuff. But there's the iconic Eiffel Tower. But you fly to Svalbard, which is an archipelago formerly owned by Norway, but with these special deals, very low tax rate to get people to live up there. Otherwise, who would live up there, right? But anyway, it's owned by Norway and administered by them. And the 3,000 residents, 2,500 of whom live in Longyearbyen, get a tax break. Okay, so we flew over Svalbard. It's just absolutely gorgeous, just some photos from the plane. Landed in Longyearbyen, which is this town of 2,500 people with brightly colored houses and stuff. And you can tell it snows much of the year because there are these snow breaks here. Interestingly, Longyearbyen began as a coal mining town by a fellow named Longyear, okay? And byen in Norwegian means city or town. Not sure which it is. But Norway is trying to be really green, and as of just a couple of months ago, July, they closed down the last remaining coal mine, all right? So they no longer mine coal there. Most of the income at Longyearbyen is now from tourism, interestingly enough, and scientific research. So that's kind of cool. They have this global seed vault there. How many of you knew about this thing? There's 1.2 million seeds in the permafrost in that tunnel there. A little bit of science here. It stores duplicates, spare copies, basically, of seeds from gene banks worldwide, acting as a safety net for crop diversity. Location in the Arctic. It's built in a mountain chosen for its cold climate, political stability, and permafrost. But in addition, the seeds are in these specially sealed packages at -18 Celsius with natural permafrost providing extra protection, but they cool them artificially as well with power. 1.2 million seed samples as of last year. That's the latest evidence I had. World's largest secure seed storage facility. And so it's an insurance against crises designed to safeguard global food security and against threats like war and climate change, natural disasters, or accidental loss in regional seed banks. So now you know that's probably the most globally famous thing about Longyearbyen. Okay, very good. So we're on this ship, Le Commandant Charcot. It's a polar class 2 icebreaker. There's only one class above that, the class 1. It's the nuclear-powered Russian 50 years of victory, okay? This is not nuclear-powered. It's powered by liquid natural gas. And it was designed with sustainability and environmental friendliness as the #1 criterion over safety and comfort, according to the captain. Yeah, so ways in which it's environmentally friendly. It uses liquefied natural gas instead of heavy fuel oil. That drastically cuts emissions and things. It has this hybrid propulsion system, the main engine with fuel, but also batteries, so they can run silently with no emissions in sensitive areas. Reduced pollution. It basically, deals with its wastewater. It doesn't dump anything to the ocean. It uses, it has low noise and vibration in sensitive areas and stuff. It optimizes energy consumption, uses LED lighting, recovers waste heat for heating the pools and things like that, optimized navigation routing to reduce fuel usage, and then it minimizes single-use materials. So our water was replenished each day in glass bottles in our cabins, and no plastic bottles, no single-use type things, okay? And they, really emphasized it. They do a bunch of research on board. Here's one, the Eleno project, seawater sampling, oceanographic sampling, sea ice. I have to go, quickly, but they're doing all kinds of interesting research there. They talked about what it is they're doing with the seawater sampling, looking at the various microbes and and other things looking at the food chain. And we saw out there during the 2.5-week journey one other vessel, a research vessel where they came on board. We talked to them for a while. They apparently are just drifting around for months to measure currents. I'm sure they're doing other things, besides, playing poker or something or cribbage. But yeah, they're like drifting around studying the currents. So those are the only people we saw in 2.5 weeks. One of the reasons I wanted to go was I wanted to go to an Arctic region. I've been to the Antarctic, although not to the South Pole. And as most of you probably know, the seasons are not caused by a changing distance of Earth from the sun, but rather by a tilt of 23.5 degrees. And it's not that that brings one side of Earth, significantly closer to the sun. That's not what's going on. It's that it makes the sun up high and the day long, when it's summer in the northern hemisphere, and conversely, the sun isn't up very long and it's not very high in the southern hemisphere. And so by being high up, you get more heating per unit area and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, when you're at a particular latitude and it's near the summer solstice, the sun is up for a long time, rises in the east, sets in the west, and nights are short. But if you imagine this thing tilted up and down, then you see that, in fact, the sun will be above the horizon the whole time, and that's true even if the pole of Earth isn't exactly up and down, as long as this diagram, you make the pole smaller than 23.5 degrees, which is where the Arctic Circle is. You can follow one of these circles here and see that the sun will remain above the horizon for the whole 24/7. And indeed, depending on where you are above the Arctic Circle, for days or even weeks or even months at a time. And at the North Pole, it would last 6 months. So online, you can find sequences like this. Here's one that I found. This is not exactly at the Arctic Circle. I can tell because the sun is significantly above the horizon. So this had to have been a little bit north of the Arctic Circle. But that's really pretty cool, okay, right? Sunset doesn't quite occur. So I wanted to get a sequence like this. That would be really fun. And then I wanted to get a sequence at the North Pole itself, because online, just looking for Google Images, I did not find a sequence at either the North Pole or the South Pole. But later, some of my students found videos, one from the North Pole and a couple from the South Pole, but still, I wanted my own. Well, it was hard to get a sequence like this because day by day we were changing latitudes and stuff, and it was also a cloudy part of the time. And I haven't put my photos together, though I did attempt it. Here's one of my photos of the midnight sun. Okay, cool, this is on the way to the North Pole. But what's interesting here is these colorful little rings here. And some of the phenomena I'll describe are visible even if you're not in the Arctic. So you can look for these phenomena. That's something called the solar corona and iridescence. It's not the sun's actual corona, but rather it's an interaction of the sunlight with water droplets or ice crystals, and it forms this pattern from a process called diffraction. And here is diffraction with only a certain wavelength of light, green light, but if you have other wavelengths as well, they get diffracted or bent by different amounts, as you can see right here. And so away from the sun, you get a bunch of different colors, and the effect is similar to when you look at a DVD or a CD in the sunlight. So here you can see the solar corona. You can look for this here. Just block the sun with your fist. Don't be looking at it. And sometimes you can see this iridescence even pretty far away from the sun. So that's something you can look for. I think a year ago at Homecoming, I talked more generally about atmospheric phenomena because I like atmospheric phenomena. All right, another atmospheric phenomenon, solar halo. We can see that from anywhere as well. If there are high cirrus clouds that are made of ice crystals, basically what happens is sunlight enters pencil-shaped ice crystals, and it exits preferentially at a 22-degree angle. And if there are ice crystals all over the place in the atmosphere, you get this 22-degree angle bending all around the sun. And by 22 degrees, I mean if you stick your thumb on the sun and then look at your pinky with your hands outstretched, that's 18 degrees, and then there's a little bit more, so you can see it's 22 degrees. From the horizon to the zenith is 90 degrees. So you can look for that phenomenon anywhere too. Interestingly, we did not see it, to my knowledge, at least I didn't, in 2.5 weeks. However, There's a phenomenon that's related when you have flat ice crystals. The light enters one side and comes out two sides later. But because these guys are flat, they have a tendency to levitate in the air more because there's more air resistance to them falling than if they were vertical. So there's an overabundance of these flat things in the atmosphere. And that leads to a phenomenon called sundogs. You can see one right here, or mock suns, parhelia. And I saw one really faint one. It's there. It's not a very good one. But by the way, there's the solar corona. At least got to see that a bunch of times. And although we didn't see it, this is what our captain saw on one trip. He would have woken us up in the middle of the night, which is day, if we had seen this, but this is from a different trip of his. Beautiful, beautiful sundogs or mock suns, and here's the ship helicopter flying around among them. Related thing to rainbows is the fog bow. We saw one of those, very interesting, kind of like the rainbow, and a rainbow is caused by incoming sunlight going through a droplet of water, bouncing off the backside, then coming out in this direction here. And the rays are bent by different amounts depending on their color or wavelength. So for rainbows, it turns out that the drop sizes are typically 1 to 2 millimeters, and that's good for this bending effect, this refraction. But fog bow drop sizes are typically 0.1 millimeters, even a 20th of a millimeter, and variable sizes. And that means that light bends around them, this diffraction effect, pretty well, more so than refraction. And that spreads out the colors and makes them overlap. And when you take the colors of the rainbow and put them all together, what do you get? You get sunlight, white light. And so here's single color diffraction to remind you, but when all the colors are sort of together, you get this white light fog bow, and we saw it twice. It was really great. Okay, I did as I was told. I gave a bunch of lectures on exoplanet atmospheres, is what I'm talking about there, and other things. So I prepared way more lectures than I actually ended up having to give because various things came up which interrupted things, like polar bear sightings and stuff. But so not all of us got to give all of our lectures, but here's a fellow, the executive secretary of the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program. He's from Norway, and he's using a traditional Nordic suit. Or was it Denmark, Noel? I don't remember. Anyway, he was deliberately dressed that way. But you know, we really did talk a lot about climate change and science and what's going on in the Arctic. Ocean acidification, projections of future Arctic climate change. And then there's a report that you can look up if you want. It's called the AMAP Arctic Climate Change Update 2024, Key Trends and Impacts. Anyway, you can find it and read all about it if you want. And then there were panel discussions among climate experts and you know, people like that. So some of the take-home messages were that there's rapid warming going on. The Arctic is warming about 3 times faster than the global average due to feedback loops, like the ice is melting and reducing reflectivity. On Greenland, not only does the ice melt, but that exposes brown ground, which is then absorbing sunlight more and accelerates the melting process. So, I mean, Arctic is anything above the Arctic Circle, okay? Melting sea ice and glaciers, summer sea ice extent has shrunk dramatically over the decades, and many glaciers and ice sheets are losing mass, contributing to global sea level rise. There's permafrost thawing. Vast areas of frozen ground are thawing out, releasing the ice that was carbon dioxide and methane, which are powerful greenhouse gases that further accelerate the warming. There's a lot of ecosystem and wildlife impacts. Species like polar bears and seals are losing habitat. Changing ocean conditions disrupt food webs and indigenous people's livelihoods. Some people do live up there. And then there are the global weather connections. Changes in the Arctic do affect things like the jet stream and stuff like that, and that can lead to more extreme weather, heat waves and storms at mid-latitudes. So that was one of the take-home messages. The other message is, of course, with all the ice, or not all of it, but a lot of it melting, here are sea routes in sort of 2015 to 2030. This is a pretty big range, but sort of a representative year. These red ones, you need an icebreaker. The blue ones or green ones, you don't even need an icebreaker. And in some 20 years to 35 years, here's what it's going to look like. All these sea routes open up to non-icebreakers, okay? So this actually has major implications for shipping industry, right? Climate change is reducing summer sea ice, making Arctic passages more accessible for long parts of the year. And in going from Europe to Asia, for example, there's a 40% savings in time and fuel and emissions compared with going through the Suez Canal, for example. And you imagine, remember when the Panama Canal was opened, instead of going all the way around South America, now you have this Panama Canal. It's just enormously important. I'm not saying all this is going to be good, but there are some good aspects of this, okay, if used, efficiently. Of course, there's geopolitical and economic significance. Some countries, won't mention any names right now, see strategic and commercial opportunities in controlling or using Arctic routes, raising questions about sovereignty, regulation, and international law. And then there are the environmental and safety concerns. Increased shipping increases the risk of oil spills and various emissions, and it certainly disturbs fragile ecosystems. Moreover, there's harsh conditions nevertheless, and it's hard to do search and rescue up there if something does go wrong. So those are the kinds of things that are happening. And there were many naturalists on board. They're employed by the company Ponant on this ship, and they gave various talks on the interconnectedness of the food chain here, starting from the zooplankton and to all the other things. And then, here are humans doing their bad things. Geographic distribution of polar bears was another topic, and there are different, regions where they sit around, and there are tables of numbers that show how the populations have been changing over the years and stuff. It was very interesting. Every day was full of lectures, and indeed, because it was this North Pole Forum, and a few of the participants suddenly said to Oliver, I want to give a lecture on my favorite topic, that displaced a few of my lectures. Well, it's okay with me. They didn't kick me off the ship, okay? And I did prepare really a lot of lectures, okay? We saw blue whales, look at that, and there's the spout, woo! In fact, I saw one while exercising in the exercise room, keeping things up so as to be able to run the marathon. We saw 3 live blue whales and 1 dead whale, although it's not clear it was a blue whale. Lots of seals, so here's some seals. I didn't have a big zoom lens, I'm just using my iPhone here. Okay, so I'm just looking at the discussion here. Yeah, good shape. I want to leave some time for Q&A. So these seals are just kind of all over the place. And then if you have a good zoom lens, right, like the fellow Richard, look at all these guys. They're so cute. We saw so many cute seals. I don't know, are these like leopard seals or something? I can't remember every single talk. Noel, are those leopard seals? I don't know. There's some sort of seals. I'm an astrophysicist, okay? But I do like animals, all right? And there they are swimming around. I mean, the wildlife was just out of this world. We saw dolphins. This is the scene of that fog bow. Near the very end, you'll see on the right the fog bow will be coming in. But there they are. Look at that. Lots and lots of dolphins. A school of them? A pod? What's a group of dolphins called? I don't know. A what? A pod. Ha! Very good. Okay. Second. And there's that fog bow. It's a little bit faint there, but yeah, that was an additional treat that while watching this amazing fog bow, which is pretty rare to have those conditions and stuff. Although again, with fog of the right type and the sun at the right elevation above the horizon, you can see fog bows here too, okay? All right, now what we were really looking for. So the captain was a really friendly guy, one of the most enthusiastic captains we've ever cruised with. Etienne Garcia, a French fellow, and he would tell us about things every few days. But what he started doing very shortly after the journey started was once we reached the ice, because at this time of the year there isn't ice on the ocean near Svalbard, but you have to go for a couple of days. And then we reached the ice, and I think, Noel, it was the 4 o'clock in the morning was the first one, or was it midnight? I can't remember. But the intercom comes up, and he goes, oh, there is a polar bear in this thick French accent, you have to get up, and I think it was 4 in the morning, okay? So we're like, oh, polar bear, polar bear. So everyone gets up, and there they are. This is midnight or 4 a.m. Doesn't matter, the sun is up, right? There they all are, people put on their parkas. And where is the polar bear? You might not see it here. Oh, there they are. That's pretty small, but look at that. Ooh, through a zoom lens, we could see them pretty well. And then what did they do? They've never seen a ship. They're very rare out there. They've never seen a human. Ooh, look at that contraption there that has all kinds of weirdly shaped seals. Maybe there's a lot of fat and blubber. So they came toward the ship. Toward the ship. Look at that. This is taken by my camera. Right? Not much zoom. Here are the professional photos. They're playing with each other. Looks like they're fighting, but they're not fighting. They're friends. Were they brother and sister? I don't even remember what they are, but yeah. And then, here they are coming toward the ship. And then they got bored and moved alongside of it, or maybe the other direction, I don't know. And look at these close-ups. These are not from online. These are from this trip. Is that cute or what? Crossing from one ice floe to another. They were so close that there I am, pointing at it, right? A selfie. And they're zooming in a bit. This was with my phone, okay? It's that close. And watching them was great. They spend a lot of time with their nose in the air, sniffing around. Where is the next seal? They don't have to eat they don't have to eat them often, but they need to eat them once in a while. See it sniffing around? It's probably thinking, what's that meat I smell on this contraption next to me? Look at that. Yeah, very cute, as long as you're at a safe distance, right? So there it is. It's just kind of sniffing around until it decided that it's not going to be able to climb up the side of the ship. But this was just so much fun, right? Watching these polar bears. So then it got bored. You saw it stuck its tongue out for a second there. And it crosses. I don't know. Yeah, there it goes. Oh, look at that. Some collapsed ice. That's when we were walking around that we were told don't get too close to the edges because the edges can fall through. So now it's coming toward the ship. It's saying maybe there's a staircase that I can take up to the ship. Get these weirdly shaped seals. There it is. It's kind of downtrodden at this point because it's not seeing anything down here. But anyway, there we go. Lots of polar bears. This one again, I think I have it sniffing around again, I think. So let's see where I am. Yeah, good shape. All right, sniffing around. All right, well, no food there that I'm going to get, so I might as well go away. The captain saw 15 of them throughout the journey. I saw 12. I tried to get Noelle up for the 12th one. It was 3 in the morning. She said, I'm tired. At some point, you become almost blasé. It was really terrible, actually. But he would always wake us up. There is a polar bear, Here's another one. Oh, by the way, this one is right. I'm looking right down from the side of the ship. If I had dropped my phone, it would have landed on the polar bear. It's that close. Sniffing around. Wondering if there's, well, yes, good things to eat up there. It was just so, we would watch them for an hour or so. If a lecture was going on, too bad, lecture. This takes priority over everything. A meal, lectures, and it happened repeatedly with whales and bears and stuff, and that's why not all the lectures were given. Oh well. Okay, so here's this guy, wonderful captain. And so I think Noelle had the idea, let's make a little video.
The polar bear.
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 Polar bear. Polar bear. Polar bear. Polar bear. Polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear. Polar bear.
It became a standing joke.
Polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear outside. Polar bear. Polar bear.
Polar bear. Starboard side. Very cold.
Polar bear.
Well, it's a polar bear.
The polar bear outside.
Polar bear.
You're noticing a pattern.
Polar bear. Polar bear. Dune polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear.
Polar bear. Polar bear. Polar bear.
It's a polar bear on the Starkville.
You're getting the picture at some. Okay.
Polar bear.
Polar bear.
The polar bear.
Polar bear. Polar bear.
Polar bear. Polar bear.
All right, I think you get the picture. It was just a sort of a standing joke because, you know, that's the way he sounded. He was so enthusiastic, and I must admit, we would have been disappointed had we not seen even one, because the naturalists told us, well, they're living up there and all that, and we'll see them, but we saw them within the first couple of days. Watching the ice was fascinating. I could have spent hours watching the ice. I sometimes did while on the treadmill for a while, just the various patterns of what it would do and stuff. May sound boring watching ice, but it wasn't boring at all. It was absolutely fascinating. Sometimes you'd see big blocks tip over completely. Yeah, very fun to watch the ice. And then on the 12th of July, I think we started on the 7th or something, we reached the North Pole. There it is, 90 degrees north. And the captain aimed the ship right to 90,000, right at the North Pole. And they erected this little monument, okay? And everyone cheered and stuff. And then they went outside, but the ship, you know, pulled away from that region. And so this is not precisely at the North Pole because we had just broken through the North Pole's ice, and so it was not safe to be there. But so we're a kilometer away, so kill us, you know what? It's close enough, okay? So there it is, 90 degrees north, and it's all times of the day now, right? At this moment, because all the lines of longitude come together, all the time zones come together, but they kept us on the same time zone on our clocks throughout the journey. Even though going from Svalbard to the North Pole, we actually did pass through several time zones. I guess it's shaped this way to keep all of the islands of the archipelago on the same time zone and stuff. But we went through several of them, but they kept it Norway time. And then at the North Pole, the captain opened up the bottle of champagne with this sword thing. What do you call it? I don't usually open bottles of champagne this way. And these poles were erected that show us the direction and distance to major cities. And, you know, we went outside and wandered around on the ice on which there was snow. And below the snow, there's sort of a slush. But it was fun to walk around. And here we're sending postcards to family members and friends from Santa's mailbox. Now, Santa's mailbox actually is in Svalbard, in this town of Longyearbyen, but the crew set up one here by the ship. And our cards have now arrived, I believe. It actually took them longer from some other places we've traveled than from the North Pole. Of course, the staff took all the cards and brought them into the ship, and then once we got to Longyearbyen, they just mailed them in the usual way. But still, we got to mail cards from the North Pole. So that was kind of fun. And everyone formed a circle and round around, clockwise and counterclockwise, around the North Pole. And again, to be totally right up front about this, this is now not exactly the pole because we had crashed through the pole. But even had we not, had we parked a kilometer away or so and then walked to where it is, there's no guarantee that it would stay that way because these ice floes are floating and moving around. So for more than an hour or so, it probably doesn't even remain stationary, right? So let's pretend we're right at the North Pole there. Okay. And then they set up a little region where we could play a quick round of miniature golf. And I don't have any photos of me or others actually playing golf, but there they are setting up the thing. There was this contest. How many times could you get a little ball into the little hole in 1 minute or whatever it was, okay? And I didn't do so well, but I did better than some, you know. But so that was fun. But I did it near the beginning and didn't do it again because I wanted to go over to here. What was going on over there? What was going on over there was that they were setting up for the polar plunge into water that's 29.7 degrees Fahrenheit, below 32, because salt water freezes at a slightly lower temperature than fresh water. It's essentially fresh ice. It gets leached out. It's actually very interesting. I had to look it up. I thought about it for a while. How does it do that? Yeah, it kind of leaches it out. It's got a slightly salty taste if you put an ice cube from salt water in your mouth, but nowhere near as salty as you'd think. But anyway, that happens at 30 degrees or a little bit below. So they've set this thing up, and we jumped in, attached with a leash in case we float away.
It's cold!
Okay, Alex, we want to do an interview. What would you like to tell us about the sun?
The sun is hot. This water is cold.
Very profound. So they had us tied to this leash because you noticed, not far away, there's this ice. And so if you go floating away or over to here and then you don't know what the currents are, then how are they going to find you, right? So, okay. Anyway, that was fun. And that day, an ice core, several of them actually, were taken by the naturalists on board and the people doing the research to study, deposition of insects or bacteria that might have made it up there and things like that. So we got to hold one of these ice cores. Then July 13th was the day of the marathon, okay? So there we go. We had a chance to rest up the previous night, quote unquote. Not that it's a night, all right? And prior to this, various people had been introduced. There were some serious runners here, folks. Yusheng Ni, 484 marathons in 15 years. And he really got started, he said, only about 5 years ago. He's been doing 60 a year for the past few years. That's more than one a week. Yep, he was hardcore. Yeah. Here's another hardcore person, Min Chen. At the age of 42, she decides to become a mountaineer. Not just any old little hill, but the 7 summits, the highest peak on every continent, and 17 high-altitude summits in total, some of them routes that were first ascents. And last year, at the age of 55, she became the oldest woman to ascend, or at least oldest Chinese woman to ascend Mount Everest, okay? Yeah. Here she's giving a talk about her various ascents and stuff. Absolutely astonishing. And decided to do this at age 42. Mengfei Liu, a 777 and the North Pole Marathon by age 13. Now, at the North Pole, she did a half marathon. I'm not sure whether these were half or full, but by age 13. And she started running for charity. She raises money for various charities, in particular premature births and stuff. There was one girl from Hawaii who had run not just her first marathon, but a 50-kilometer, that's like 30 miles, almost, not quite, by the age of 10. Okay, yeah, I don't have her picture here, but she lives in Hawaii. But this one, 777 and the North Pole Marathon. All right, so we were among some serious runners. I wasn't out there to set any world records, although there were various categories for the Guinness Book of World Records. Fastest male, fastest female, fastest, adult child, quote to speak. You have to be at least 18, I think, to qualify for that, but whatever. I was just wanting to complete it, and I had only trained for 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. I got up to 52 or 55% of a marathon, then we had to leave for Paris, and I figured, well, the worst that can happen is I'll run half of it and I'll walk the rest of it. I actually ran the whole thing. Took me 7.5 hours, but I was running. Both feet were off the ground, okay? And that included the clock ticking during 2 bathroom breaks, which I tried to make as short as possible because the danger is your muscles start to solidify, tighten and stuff. So there's part of the track. It was 50 loops around basically the North Pole, right? Because they didn't want you running 13 miles out and then something goes wrong and how are they going to get you and stuff? And, it'd be hard to set up snack places and stuff. And suppose you need to go to the bathroom. There's no porta potties out there. We went to the bathroom on the ship. So it was 50 loops. It was pretty boring. But I listened to a book, Wade Davis's Into the Silence, which is the book about Mallory and Irving's attempt to climb Everest. So there I am, run number 104, running. And there's a chain of 5 runners to set the world record of a chained team. It's only as fast as their slowest person. And when they have to go to the bathroom, which they did, I think, at least once, because some of them were slow and they had to go to the bathroom at some point. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what they did, but they were chained together, I think, the whole time. There were stalls next to each other and whatever. There were some interesting sights because there were some like little hills and stuff with icicles. And there I am, running, with my ear pods attached, and I've got my phone here, and I'm listening to a book, because it took 7.5 hours, right? And some parts were very slushy. Yes, you're running on ice, but there's snow on top of that. And in between the snow and the ice, there's this like water. And I had gaiters on, but the water was so deep that quickly, within the first lap, the gaiters were doing no good whatsoever. But I didn't want to stop and change socks and stuff because they would get wet again as well. And my toes were getting cold, but I figured the fact that they're moving and I'm generating energy will keep them from freezing. And that was true. They did not freeze off. There were sentries, guards. Why? Polar bear. Yes, they need to see them. And then I thought they were going to set off flares to scare it away, and then shoot an air rifle if it gets closer, and then shoot but miss if it gets even closer. It's absolutely forbidden, of course, to shoot them. They're a protected species. But I later found out that, had this happened too early in the marathon, if it were late, they said, well, just get on the ship and there's one deck where you can run around. If it happened at the start, it would have been 126 laps along a narrow deck and about 90 runners or whatever passing each other, and it would have been chaos. But no polar bear that day. That was really fortunate because this kind of a thing could have happened, right? And Noel made this using AI, okay? Yes. They could not risk a polar bear coming and mauling someone, so they would have shut it down. And the longer you run, the greater is the chance that a polar bear sighting, the person who did it in 3 hours and 40 minutes. By the way, the normal world record on normal terrain is 2 hours. Now, not the very best runner was there, but pretty good runners were there, and it shows the difficulty of the conditions. So 3 hours and 40 minutes, I think, was our fastest time. There was a first aid station and little snack bar. I didn't need to bring powered gels and stuff, but I did. I didn't really need to. And then here we are. Here I am.
Look who's coming! It's Alex!
This is my final lap. Number 50. 0.815 kilometers per lap. It's pretty windy.
You got it!
It's not that cold, actually, except for the wind chill. Holding my iPhone. There we go.
Oh my goodness, you did it!
Hey, stop.
What's that? You want to say?
Oh, and then they wanted to take a picture of me because you saw them messing around with the tape. They had it, turned the wrong way, so they made me recreate the moment for their official photos. This is how documentaries are made too. People see me at the telescope. Was that really live? No, because they couldn't be running 24/7. It's expensive to do so. Whenever anything interesting happens at the observatory, they ask us to recreate it. So anyway, so it was an amazing experience. Again, I don't have a huge desire to go off running marathons throughout the world, and certainly not the 777, where they would sleep on the plane on their way to the next continent. And they wanted long plane rides. The one from Antarctica to South Africa or Chile, whichever one they did, wasn't a very long one. So I'm wearing this shirt, North Pole Marathon, on the back, world's coolest marathon, and on the front it says official attempt. Well, no, we completed it, but they needed to make these t-shirts before the trip. So if you look carefully, official attempt at the Guinness Book of World Records. That's what the attempt is. Well, I wasn't attempting any Guinness Book of World Records, okay? But some people there in some categories did do it. Okay, let's get back to the science a little bit. I mentioned that I do have a set of photographs like this. I have not yet stitched them together. It's going to be a bit hard because we were changing latitude. But what about at the pole? So that's where I claimed I didn't find any still images. But a couple of my students, when I announced this, said, well, go to this website, and it'll show this thing here. 6.5 hours on the 6th of September, 2015. The sun's path at the North Pole. Yeah. Someone's done it, and you can find it online. It's this guy, Bill Schmucker, polar trek teacher. I guess it was an expedition. And here's part of the 6.5 hours. And their ship was at the North Pole. And you can see that the sun's altitude is not changing because you're just rotating around like this, but the sun, from your perspective, is just going around in circles. It's not changing altitude the way it does if you're not quite at the North Pole. So this exists, and at the South Pole, there's a continent. There's actually astronomical research stations, and so this is pretty easy to do at the South Pole because there's a couple of thousand people during the austral summer, researchers and people, and so they just wait for a clear day or two, and they've done this. So at the South Pole, it's pretty easy. North Pole, it's a lot harder, but this is from the North Pole. Didn't know about it. Nevertheless, I wanted to do it myself anyway. So here I am running, and every lap or two, I would stop, and I would line up my phone, trying to get the horizon at the same place each time, 1/3 of the way up. There's a little line on your phone that indicates 1/3. And all these other runners didn't know what the hell I'm doing, right? Are they like, are you a sun worshiper or something? No, I'm doing an experiment. I'm taking some observations. So here's one of my observations of the sun with the sentry guy. And here, late last night, I stitched them together, folks. Noel, I did it. I did it. 15 hours worth. Yeah, thank you. You can see the horizon is pretty much in the same place. Sometimes it was hard to see because when the sun was bright, I'm looking into the sun, which is not a good thing to do. And when it's really cloudy, well, it's easier to see, but sometimes the distinction between the horizon and the clouds, right there, it's very difficult to tell. Here, it's very difficult to tell, right? But I did line them up, and there's a little tiny bit of waviness there, but that's fake. So 15 hours, you might say, well, I was only running for 7.5 hours, so what's going on here? Well, at dinner that night, I broke away from the group occasionally to go outside and take a photograph of the sun, right? Had to do it. Science comes first. There's another one. So every time I kept escaping from our guests, I told them what I'm doing so as to not appear rude. So there it is, the final thing. But there wasn't just dinner. I had to do it at other times as well. Look, from the beginning of the marathon to late at night, which is still during the day. After the marathon, well, I had put on, I think, the moleskin so as to not get blisters, but there's my feet. This is perhaps too much information, but my toes were really cold, and when I went into the warm shower, ooh, it was just so painful, right? I should have probably had the water be more lukewarm even still, because going from really cold, almost frozen, to really hot is, in fact, a bad thing to do.
All right.
But I went into the pool, which was very warm. but I'm really sore at this point.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Your arm's gonna work out. Oh, it's deep.
Oh, okay, this is good.
That's right there. There you go.
Good. Woo!
Good job.
Oh, my God.
Okay, so that was, and then we went into the sauna, okay? But still, time's ticking away, and I gotta go outside and take my photographs every once in a while. So there they are, okay? Yep, so it took some real effort to do that. All right, then we start heading home, and we're kayaking, and that was fun. And then someone sights a polar bear. And it's far away initially, and then it gets closer. And polar bears know how to swim. So we kayakers were told to get back to the ship right away, okay? Get back to the ship. Look, there's the kayakers and stuff, right? And people in little Zodiacs. Then there was another polar plunge. Not when the polar bear was there, but I did that one too. And then we went and visited, intentionally, it was gonna be 8 different places in Svalbard. I think it ended up being only 7, but that was amazing because we got close to land, and when we were starting to get close to land, I had talked about how people might see mirages. Here's what's called an inferior mirage, which produces water on a road. But there's also a thing called a superior mirage when you have cold water and warmer air above it. And that can produce a lifted, either inverted or right side up image of an object. And here, this was not from this trip, this is someone else online, is a mirage of that sort. But we got some islands and mountain peaks that look like they're kind of floating. And by the way, here's some seals. Didn't see as many mirages as I had hoped. That's the way it goes. We went to various places, saw incredible things, had a bunch of shore landings, reindeer several times, Arctic foxes, flowers in a few places, but there's not much vegetation there. Reindeer, this is near the very end, lots of vegetation there. Amazing cliffs and waterfalls, and on these cliffs, these birds live. What are they called? They are called guillemots. Look at them all. There's 60,000 of them on these cliffs. Look at them all, flying around, sitting there. Guillemots.
He's got to get a little present.
Amazing. All right. Kayaked among glaciers. In a Zodiac,
what kind of bird did you say?
among the icebergs.
Black-legged kittiwake.
Held a piece of ice. Wanted to take a bite out of it. But here's a close-up. There are all these little air pockets. See them? When exposed to the sun, and it was pretty warm, by the way, 40s usually. People ask, was it really cold in the Arctic? Not so cold. But the ice is melting away, and then the bubbles pop open. So if you're really quiet floating around on the Zodiac, you can hear these snap, crackle pops of all these little bubbles exploding from the ice. The amazing glacier, Victory. And then someone, this might have been Peter Sage, he did have a video, but I'm not sure this is his video. Watch this, folks. I'm near the end. There will be some time for Q&A, but watch this. Forgot which glacier this is. But everyone's waiting for a calving event. And there it is. Keep watching. This is normal. Glaciers do come into the ocean. It's just the rate at which they're receding is of concern. Whoa! Whoa! When we were kayaking and on the Zodiacs, we were not allowed to get closer than about half a mile from the glacier because this created real waves that could have tipped us over. But that was amazing. I've got to find out who took that video. Again, incredible scenery, and there are thousands of photographs that I haven't even looked through yet because I've been busy teaching and doing research and trying to keep my head above water, so to speak. But it was an amazing trip. There's time for questions. It's only 12:24. Thank you for joining us, and go Bears. Great, so I don't have to repeat the questions. Yeah. And if this room isn't being occupied, we could go to 12:35 or something if you don't mind. But one of my students, Griffin, is right behind you, but yes. Yeah, okay.
Hi.
Let's do that one first.
Okay. My question has to do with the ability to navigate at the North Pole.
Oh.
And I know GPS systems often fail or give very strange locations. Do you know anything about that?
Absolutely. So the captain must have had, that's a good question, he must have had some more precise device or accurate or some combination of devices, because the compass feature on a phone went crazy. We tried this. It was, indeed, at the pole itself, when they put up that structure, you could try this and the arrow didn't know where to point. It did settle a little bit in one direction for the following reason. The magnetic pole of Earth is different from the geographic spin pole. So I lied a little bit when I said that it was going completely crazy. If you let it settle down, there were some preferred directions. I think we went close to, but not exactly over the magnetic pole on our way. There were so many things to look for and think about and stuff. Honestly, I forgot to do that experiment. Next time, Noel, remind me. When we're on the way to the North Pole, and I forgot exactly where magnetic north is, but I think it was somewhere close to where we were, I should have seen that. But it was, more difficult at the time because all these lines are converging and there's not as clear a direction in which to point.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One about wildlife. Are there any penguins up in the area?
There are no penguins.
Okay.
They're in the Antarctic.
And
there are no polar bears in the Antarctic. So that's how you tell the difference.
And second, any lunar sightings? Was the moon visible up
Lunar
there?
sightings, no. The moon was not visible for most of the trip. Because if you look at the geometry and all that, when the sun is up like this, so we're pointing at the sun. And the moon basically goes around Earth's equator, but at somewhat of a tilt, okay? But for much of the 2 weeks, the moon was over here, and our horizon is like this, so we see everything above the horizon here. The moon's down there. It was like a 10-day period or something. July 16th or something, the moon rose, because I brought this up to the people. So some people even ask, when are we going to see the moon? Ain't going to see it for a while, folks, not till near the end of the journey. Yeah. Corollary of seeing the sun, yeah. Okay, right there. We'll have to get Griffin as well, one of my students. Yes?
Oh, yeah, first off, congratulations on the marathon.
Thank you, yeah.
Seems like it would be hard enough doing it right around here in Berkeley. But
it was just, I think I would have hit myself had I not taken advantage of this opportunity, even though I was hired as a speaker.
Right, but that was kind of hardcore, so I'm just curious. You were on your phone and listening.
Yeah, I was listening because it was just, how many times around.
Yeah.
It starts looking pretty much the same. Yeah, and other people were looking for the polar bears, so I didn't want to distract myself.
Right on, they took care of that. Yeah, so my question was this. It seems that in the observations, there's a lot of wildlife, there's a lot of different animals. So what are the observations on what's changing? And where would the polar bears go?
Well, so where do the polar bears go? So, by the way, about the only thing to see during the North Pole Marathon was a polar bear, if one happened to come close, because we were on a big enough ice floe that you'd be unlikely to see a seal because they stay pretty close to the edge where they can dive into the water to swim faster than the polar bear does. So there's not much wildlife basically at the pole itself. With the changing ice, their habitat is changing. They're hanging around a lot more now in northern Greenland and central parts of Greenland and stuff as well. There's still a lot of places for them to go. I totally admit climate change and the fact that humans are causing most of it, and there are things going on. But the extreme statements, we're all going to die tomorrow, and the polar bears have no place to live. Those are extreme statements which, to people who are knowledgeable, then lead to a discrediting of you, right? Because they're all, well, what can we believe if this person says all these crazy things, right? Yeah, by the end of the century, there's going to be huge humanitarian displacement of people like in Bangladesh, or you look at, New Orleans or whatever. In the Netherlands, they've been dealing with this for a while. Amsterdam and stuff, they've built dikes and things. So as Al Gore said, it's an inconvenient truth, and we need to start dealing with it. But the polar bears do still have places they can wander around, just not as many, and that is of some concern. Yeah. I had a student, Griffin. How about my student Griffin there? Right. So Griffin often asks questions in lectures. So yeah, thank you for coming. Yeah, I think it's working.
Did I get it? Yay!
Yay.
Okay. Not an astronomy related question this time, but
okay.
One question, it has 2 parts. 1, did you see any fish? And 2, what was the coolest thing you learned about fish there?
Did I see any fish, and what was the coolest thing? We might have seen a seal eating a fish. I'm not sure. Oh, we saw some birds. In fact, there was a photo contest, and one of the participants won like best photo. It was some gull or something, some weird bird. Well, gulls aren't that weird, but he had it flying, and it had a little tiny minnow-like thing in its beak, right? And it had just lifted it from the water. So we did see, well, I saw a photograph. Did I see that actually happening? No. So a lot of the fish, I think, well, we'd have to go back to that slide where they show the complex ecosystem and stuff. It's not, an equatorial warm water where there are all kinds of things in Tahiti or Indonesia or the Coral Triangle and stuff. You're not going to see a gazillion different brightly colored fish there. But I didn't see any in the water, and so I can't tell you which one was the coolest other than this photograph. Yeah. And then there are a lot of fish in the Arctic. Yeah, Noelle and I once went scuba diving in Alaska. And in fact, there are quite nutrient-rich waters in the Arctic. However, correct me if I'm wrong, and I may well be wrong about this. In terms of the number of species, you go to something like the Coral Triangle, which is thought to have been long ago one of the birthplaces of sort of speciation of marine creatures and stuff. You go to, the Philippines and Raja Ampat and places like that, Palau, and the number of species is absolutely enormous. But yes, if I said that polar waters are not nutrient-rich, I misspoke. They are nutrient-rich, and some fish like it there. They have antifreeze in their blood. But Griffin, are there a lot of species of fish in the Arctic? I mean, like right at the North Pole is what I mean, not just Alaska. It's more than you would think. But not a coral reef, yeah. There are, cool ones. The starfish are massive. Yeah, of course, in the equatorial regions and stuff, there are these crown of thorns things with like 25 arms, and they're gradually destroying everything else. So there's, again, this balance between, farming them and eating them versus letting them just go wild, and then they go and destroy in their own way the ecosystem and stuff. So yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things. Honestly, there were so many interesting talks by the naturalists that they kind of fuzzed together a little bit, and I have photographs of some of the key slides, but ever since the trip, it's been nonstop busy. And so really, in putting together this talk at the last minute, I think I told the class the other day, right? I got to go and put this talk together. I haven't even had a chance really to reminisce very much about the trip, but I'll be looking through the slides of the naturalists. And I know there was a talk about fish, but I was either thinking about the next talk that I'm going to give or worrying that, oh man, there's going to be a polar bear sighting, so I'm not going to be able to give the talk, right? That I perhaps wasn't as attentive as I should have been. But there were talks like all the time. It was amazing how educationally enriching this program was. Did you have a quick follow-up there? The Guillemot, oh, well, there you go. But the Guillemots, they're at Svalbard, right? The archipelago, which is at plus 78, if I'm not mistaken. So above the Arctic Circle comfortably, but not at plus 90. So yeah, the 60,000 guillemots, and I wrote it down because I don't know birds very well, northern fulmars as well. Anyone know about northern fulmars? You do. You know a lot about biology. Okay, so the guillemots, right. So those could be like the Alaskan waters where we scuba dived, where indeed we were told by a naturalist and then we saw for ourselves lots of different things. I'm just not sure at the pole itself, what's there for them to do? Nothing to do. They don't play poker and stuff. I mean, I guess any ocean is good as another. But at least at coral reefs or the shores of Svalbard and Spitsbergen, which is the biggest island, there are crabs, there are fish, there are things for the birds to eat. But yes, Arctic waters, perhaps counterintuitively, are quite nutrient rich. Well, thank you so much. And if you have a burning question while I'm putting away my computer here, I'll be glad to answer it. Sorry that I went on a bit longer than normal, but at 4 in the morning I said, I have 170 slides. I had better stop and get a few hours of sleep, all right? So thank you so much. Go Bears. Have a great time here.